Hello and welcome to Conquest TV, your free video guide to your Warhammer 40,000 Conquest subscription. My name's Frankie Vu, and over a series of 20 videos, I'm going to take you through the first 20 issues of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. Over these videos, we're going to learn about the Warhammer 40,000 universe and some of the forces battling in it, such as the heroic Ultramarines and villainous Death Guard. We'll discover how to build and paint a range of plastic miniatures, including units of Ultramarines and Death Guard warriors. We'll have great heroes, deadly vehicles, and battlefield scenery. By the time we're done, you'll be able to take this to this. We'll also find out how to use your models in games of Warhammer 40,000, turning them from cool-looking figures in your collection into mighty warriors who can fight epic battles on the tabletop. In this first video, we'll be covering issue 1 of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest, which includes an introduction to the universe and our first models, Space Marine Intercessors. To get us started, let's find out more about what Warhammer 40,000 is. Warhammer 40,000 is more than just a game. It's an entire hobby. To create your collection of warriors, you get to build your models, customize them with your own paint job, and then form them into units to use in your games. Over the course of this series, Warhammer 40,000 Conquest and these videos will help guide you through all three parts of this great hobby: building your models, painting them, and using them in games. There is a fourth part to the Warhammer 40,000 hobby as well, exploring the background and stories of the 41st millennium. It's a huge galaxy filled with heroes and villains, armies and wars, and thousands of stories to be told. You'll learn about the Ultramarines, the most heroic of all Space Marine chapters, and their homeworld of MACRAGGE, as well as the bold Intercessors who make up the core of their armies. You'll also discover the Death Guard, traitors who have been battling the Ultramarines for 10,000 years, and are host to all sorts of horrible diseases. You'll see their world, the Plague Planet, and discover the secrets behind the Plague Marines. In every issue of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest, you'll find a little bit more about the universe, its inhabitants, and some of the greatest wars it's seen. Now let's get started building your models. To begin with, all of your models will be on plastic frames like this. These are called sprues. So in order to put the different pieces together, we'll need to cut off each of them using a pair of clippers, which look like this. Now, clippers you can get from a Games Workshop, or if you're a subscriber, you'll be given a pair of these with your subscription as well. So all of the steps that we're about to go through are shown in the magazine. So I'd encourage you to have this open with you and next to you while you watch the video and while you're building your models, just to make sure that it's nice and easy for you, because the step-by-step guides are really good. So we're going to start by cutting out pieces 1 to 6 to build Sergeant DECIUS. So I'm going to pick up my clippers and start with piece number 1. All of the pieces on here are numbered to make it nice and easy, and if you follow the numbers through, that will make it easier for you as well. So when you cut using the clippers, the best way to do it is to have 4 fingers on one side and your thumb on the other. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the flat edge of the clippers and line that up with the first part that I want to cut out. So taking that flat edge up to number 1, which is Decius' head, I'm going to line it up like that and push together firmly to take out the first piece. Now don't worry if you can't catch it, even though we do recommend that you keep all the pieces together. You can use a shallow dish or a plastic tray just to make sure all the pieces stay in one place, and it'll make it much easier for you to build the models. So I've done piece number 1, which was Decius' head. Now I'm going to move on to number 2, which is his body. Now for this part here, I'm going to line up the flat edge again, but you've got to be very careful not to cut off the peg, because it's going to be used to put the actual model together. So I'm going to line up the flat edge with the peg, making sure not to cut it off, press together like that, and I'm going to do the same thing with the different parts of the piece. So I'll move around just like that, using the flat edge always. Now when you're using clippers like this, you want to make sure that you're always cutting away from yourself, and that will keep you nice and safe. So that is part number 2. I'm going to move on to number 3 now, which is the second part of his body, just his back there. So lining up the flat edge with the part that I want to cut out, I'm going to make my way around part number 3, always cutting away from myself. Sometimes if that happens, that's when you need a plastic dish or a tray, maybe a shallow bowl, just to keep all your pieces in one place. So that is part number 3. I'm going to move on to number 4 now, which is Decius' arm and his bolt rifle. So making sure to cut away from myself once again. I'm going to move around part number 4. There we go. The next part. Number 5 is Decius' other arm. Using that flat edge to line up the different parts or the different pieces that I'm cutting. There we go. That is number 5. And the last part of Decius is his power pack, which is number 6. So I'm going to line that up using the flat edge again. Moving around the piece, always cutting away from myself. And there we go, that's the last cut. And now we have all of the pieces for Sergeant Decius. So I'm going to put that down to one side. Now once you've got all of the pieces, you can actually turn the page in your magazine to see all the step-by-step guides for the different models. So as I'm starting with Sergeant Decius, I'm using parts 1 to 6, and in the magazine you'll see all of the steps for building this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with part number 1, his head, and I'm going to attach his head to his body. So to line that up, I just use my thumb like this, making sure that Decius' head is facing the right way. Then I'm going to take his back, and you can see here that these 2 pegs are meant to go in the holes here, just to secure Decius' head in place. So I'm going to line that up and push these 2 parts together. Sergeant Decius is looking at a slight angle. He's obviously spotted something, but he does need some arms to be able to take some action on what he's just spotted. So now I'm going to take his first arm like this. Once again, you can see the peg and the hole. You want to line these up together. So sometimes you need to move the pieces around just a little bit so that you can find the perfect angle to place that peg into the hole. And there we have it. That's the first arm. Next, I'm going to get Sergeant Decius' other arm. And again, I'm going to search for the perfect angle. It looks like I may have found it. There we go. Now we have Decius with 2 arms. And finally, I'm going to put on his power pack. So let's find the peg and the hole, push together firmly, and we are looking pretty good. The final part is to stick Decius into the slotter base, just like this. And there you have it. You've just built your very first Space Marine intercessor. The next Space Marine we're going to build is Intercessor Apollon, which is parts 7 to 12 on your sprue. To make it easier, parts 7 to 12 are all on one side. So, following the same process that I did for Decius, I'm going to use my clippers, lining up the flat edge with the part that I'm going to cut out. So starting with the head, which is part number 7, I'm going to get my clippers in here. There we go, easy does it. And I'm going to push together with my clippers to bring the head out. There we go. Next up, we're moving on to the body, which is part number 8. And remember not to cut off the pegs when you're making your way around the pieces, because if you do cut off the pegs, then you won't be able to attach Apollon's arms. Nobody wants that. So I'm going to follow the same process as I did before, moving around and cutting away from myself, always using that flat edge to line up the different points that I'm cutting. There we go. One more. And we have Apollon's body. Well, the front of his body anyway. So we're going to move on to the next step now, which is number 9. Number 9 is Apollon's back, following the same steps with my flat edge and cutting away from myself. I'm going to cut out Apollon's back. Here we go. That is piece number 9. And then it gets interesting with his bolt rifle. So I'm going to make my way around the rifle, and his bolt rifle is actually attached to his arm. You could say that he's very attached to his weapon, which I would be as well if I was a Space Marine. So there we go. That's an arm and a bolt rifle. Coming up next is the other arm. Very, very important. I'm going to move around and cut that piece out as well, cutting away from myself. Now there's a peg on here as well, which you need to be aware of, because that is going to attach to the other side of the bolt rifle. So make sure you don't cut off that peg. There we go. And finally, we have Apollon's power pack. So I'm going to cut that one out as well, following the same steps. Flat edge, cutting away from myself. There we go, last piece. And there we go. Now that we have all of Apollon's body parts, we're going to put them together. Now remember, for this part, use the magazine to follow through the step-by-step guide. It makes it super, super easy. That's what I'm going to do as well. So starting with the head and the body, I'm going to line up Apollon's head with his body like this, using my thumb to hold it in place whilst I grab the back, which is going to attach just like this, using the pegs and pushing them into place with those holes as well. So press firmly so that it's all nicely slotting into place, just like that. There we go. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach Apollon's arms and his bolt rifle. So I'll start with this one. There we go. And now I'm going to attach Apollon's bolt rifle and his other arm, pushing them all together like this. And you can see here that Apollon is actually holding onto his bolt rifle with both arms. So that means that you've got a peg and a hole on either side in order to attach his arm and his bolt rifle. Starting to take shape now. For the next step, I'm going to stick Apollon's power pack on. So I line up the peg with the hole on the back, push that into place, and we are almost ready. Finally, we're going to stick Apollon into his base. And now, Intercessor Apollon can join forces with Sergeant DECIUS. Next, we're going to build our third Space Marine, Intercessor GALEUS, which is parts 13 to 18. Now on this sprue, you should have only those parts left over, so it'll make it nice and easy for you. And I'm going to follow the same process using these clippers, lining up the flat edge with the first part that I'm going to cut out. So that is going to be GALEUS' head. So let's line up that flat edge, press together. There we go. Now I'm going to follow the same steps to cut out his body. And remember not to cut off the pegs, because those are very important for attaching GALEUS' arms. But I'm going to line up the flat edge of the clippers with the end of that peg, cutting away from myself. There we go. Making my way around GALEUS' body. This is part number 14, which is going to be the front of his body. There we go. Part number 15 is going to be his back. Lining up the flat edge with each of the pieces and making my way around. Should be nice and easy to get all of these parts out and off the sprue. There we go, that's his back. Now moving on to GALEUS' arm and bolt rifle. So I'm going to line up the flat edge again, just to cut these bits out. There we go. Nicely done, if I do say so myself. Then I'm going to get to his next arm and the Auspex scanner as well. That's a good way to tell the difference between GALEUS and the other Space Marines that we've built, GALEUS has got an Auspex scanner, and he's the only one who has one of those. So the final part of Intercessor GALEUS is his power pack, and we're going to follow the same steps to cut that out from the sprue as well. And there we have all of the pieces for Intercessor GALEUS. So now that we've got all the pieces, let's build GALEUS. Remember, all of these steps are in your magazine, so do have a look at that. It will make it super easy for you. So I'm going to start with the head and the front of the body again, lining it up just like this and using my thumb to hold the head in place. I'm then going to get the back and line up these two pegs with the holes and press firmly together to stick GALEUS' head in place. Now I'm going to move on to the arms, and first up is the arm with the bolt rifle. So this one has an interesting angle where the gun is pointing upwards, so I'm going to make sure that I move it around until I find the perfect position, and it looks like I've found it. So there we go, starting to take shape now. Next we're going to go for the arm with the Auspex scanner as well. We're going to stick that here on the other side, using the peg and the holes. And finally, the power pack slots in to the back using that peg like so. And now we're going to get GALEUS slotted into his base. And there we have our complete set of Space Marine intercessors. Now before we start painting, there are a few things to bear in mind to make it all much easier. The first thing is, try to paint in a well-lit area. This will mean you can clearly see what you're doing and will make everything easier for you. The second thing is you want to cover the space where you're painting. So I've got a piece of paper here, but it doesn't have to be that. It can be some newspaper or whatever you like, just to keep things neat and tidy. You're also going to want some clean water, so you can have this in a mug or a cup, either of those is fine. Now the water is for keeping your paintbrush clean and also for thinning the paint as well. So because you're going to need to clean your paintbrush between changing colours, you probably want to change the water quite regularly. Finally, you want to have a tissue or a piece of cloth or something like that just to keep your paintbrush clean in between changing colours. Now all of the steps and everything that you need to know is in the paint guide in issue 1 of your magazine, so make sure you've got that with you, and I think we're ready, so let's get painting. Painting is easy with the Citadel paint system, with different types of paint for different tasks. What we're going to start with today is the base coat. So I've got MACRAGGE blue here, and if you look closely at the paint pot, you can see the word base on there, and that forms the foundation of the paint job. So I'm going to put this down for a second, and I'll show you how to use the paintbrush. Now you hold it like a pencil, just like this. And the first thing we're going to do with the paintbrush is we're going to wet the bristles in your water. Then I'm going to take off the excess water just to create a nice fine point on the paintbrush. So now that that's ready, I'm going to pick up my MACRAGGE blue, making sure that the lid is closed because we don't want the paint going everywhere. I'm going to give it a good shake. And now I'm going to place it down here, somewhere where it won't get knocked over. And we're just going to open up the paint like this, pick up my paintbrush, and just take a little dollop of paint from the pot, and I'm putting it onto a palette here. Now, for this, you don't have to use a palette. You can actually just use an old plate. That will do the job just fine. So if you don't have enough paint yet, just get another little bit there and place that carefully onto the palette. Now I'm going to get a tiny, tiny bit of water onto the end of the brush, just to mix with the paint that I've got here. And there we go. Mix that together. And once that's all done, we're ready to start painting. So I'm going to take some of this paint here and apply it evenly and slowly to my intercessor with even brush strokes. The idea is to paint the entire intercessor in this base coat because it forms the foundation for the other colours. Now once you've painted the entire intercessor's body, it should look something like this. Here's one that we painted earlier, As you can see, the entire body of the Intercessor is evenly covered in the base coat, and this will make it a lot easier for us to paint with the next colours. So when you're finished with your MACRAGGE blue, make sure to close the paint pot because you don't want it to dry out. But it takes about half an hour for each of these Intercessors to dry, which is plenty of time for you to paint your next 2 Intercessors as well. And once they're dry, you're ready to start with the next colours. The next colour we're going to use is ABADDON Black. Now the first thing we want to do is make sure that we've got some clean water replaced in our cup or in our mug, and that's just to make sure that the colours don't mix together when we change paints. So I'm going to put that down and prepare my paintbrush just in the same way that I did before, holding it like a pencil, get a little bit of water on there, and then take off the excess so that we've got a nice fine point on the paintbrush. So now it's time to get our ABADDON Black ready. So I'll pick up the paint pot, making sure that the lid is nice and firmly closed. So I'll hold that tight, give it a good shake, and then it's time to open it up. So I'll open up our ABADDON Black just like that, and I'm going to take a little bit of paint, just a little dollop there, put it onto my palette, maybe get a little bit more. Then, once that's on there, I'll take the tiniest bit of water and just mix it together. There we go. Right, and now that I've got that ready, I'm going to start painting. So I'll pick up my already base coated Intercessor here. And the first thing you want to start with is the bolt rifle. So the details are a little bit smaller now, but don't worry if you get some paint on the hands, for example, because you can always touch it up later with a bit of MACRAGGE blue. So the things that you're looking out for here are things like the bolt rifle, the equipment pouches, the ribbed joints between the armour. But if you want the exact details, you can find all of them in the paint guide inside your magazine. Now once I finish painting all the ABADDON Black, it should look like this. So as you can see there, I've got the bolt rifle painted, I've got the ribbed joints between the armour, we've got the equipment pouches painted as well. And once that's all dry, you're ready to start with the next colour. Next up, we have Retributor armour. The contrast of the gold against the black and the blue really stands out and makes the Intercessors look like the noble heroes that they are. So to start off with Retributor armour, we're going to follow the same process as we have done before. I'm going to prepare my paintbrush just by getting a little bit of water and then taking off the excess to create that fine point. Then I'm going to take my Retributor armour paint pot, making sure that the lid is very secure. Give it a really good shake there. Then I'm going to put that down and open it up somewhere where it won't get knocked over. There we go. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the paint, just a bit on there. There we go, maybe a little bit more. And just the tiniest bit of water, just on the edge of the bristles to mix that together with my Retributor armour. Now to get started on the painting, I'm going to take my Intercessor model, which has already been base coated in MACRAGGE blue, and then we've got the bolt rifle and some other details in ABADDON Black as well. But what I'm going to do with the Retributor armour is I'm going to start with the trim on the shoulder guards. Now for this part, you want to try and be as neat as possible because that will make it much more effective when it comes to the contrast between the gold and the black and the blue. And once you've done the shoulder guards, you can also paint the Aquila on the bolt rifle and on the chest of your Intercessor as well. But if you need any reminders of the different parts that you need to paint in Retributor armour, you can always refer to the magazine, which has all the details in there. So once you've painted all the necessary parts in Retributor armour, it should look like this. As you can see, the painting is done really neatly on the shoulder guards, on the Aquila, on both the bolt rifle and on the chest. And it looks pretty cool. But don't worry if you make mistakes because you can always go over them again later in blue or black. Your new Intercessors won't be seeing battle just yet. They'll need some enemies to fight. The first of these dreaded foes will be coming in issue 2. But in the meantime, there's a mission briefing about the battles ahead in your first issue. This sets the scene for the clash on the Ultramarine starship Honor of Ultramar, which is where the tutorials and battles across these videos will be taking place. I'll see you again soon for the second video in the series, where we'll be building and painting our first unit of Death Guard and taking our models to the battlefield for the first time. See you then.